Well, really a pleasure to be here with you all this morning. I want to thank Brandon for inviting me to be with you today. He has been extremely supportive of me over the years, and also when he learned that I was writing this book from the beginning. Let me know how I can help you. Going to invite you down, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, as you all know, there's a lot of people in life that will tell you things and offer you things, and then they seem to forget, or it never quite happens. But he said, I'm going to invite you down, and here we are. So thank you very much. I was here just a few short months ago. I'm working for the V Foundation for Cancer Research, and by the way, all of my proceeds from this book are being donated to the V Foundation for Cancer Research, which ESPN started in 1993. Perhaps some of you have seen the Valvano speech that he delivered. If you watch a lot of ESPN, it'd be hard to miss the speech, but probably one of the most electric nights I ever spent at ESPN. It was March 4th, 1993 at Madison Square Garden. We decided to launch an award show for sports because there wasn't such a thing. We cobbled together the ESPYs. We go to Arthur Ashe's wife, Jeannie, said we'd like to make an annual award on behalf of one of the greatest athletes and one of the greatest people of all time, Arthur Ashe. We're going to have the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage. And we awarded it, the first one, to Jim Valvano, our colleague, who was very sick with cancer. The day before, and I write about this in the book, the day before the speech, Dick Vitale is rehearsing at the old Felt Forum, which had been renamed the Paramount Theater. Bob Gutkowski reminded me the other night. I listed as the Felt Forum in the book. He claims it had already been renamed the Paramount Theater. But anyway, Dick is rehearsing the show, and he calls his friend Jim Valvano in Raleigh, North Carolina, and says, Jimmy, you've got to come to get this award tomorrow night. Jim didn't even want to come to the phone. His wife, Pam, said, Dick, he's not even taking calls. He's in bed. And Dick was pleading with Pam to put Jim on the phone. Jim finally comes to the phone. Dick says, you have to come here tomorrow night. This is going to be special. And it was really Mike Krzyzewski and his wife, Mickey, who jumped into action and basically escorted Jimmy V and his wife, Pam, on a commercial flight up to New York. He's getting sick the whole way on the flight up. He got even sicker when he got to New York. Pam had to send out for more medicine. So the day of the show is the next day. Somehow, Jim Valvano musters the strength to come over to the Garden that night. Somehow, he musters the strength to get on stage. And instead of just giving one of those, hey, thanks for having me, and I really appreciate this award, and stepping down, somehow it was almost as if the cancer had left his body for the 10 to 12 minutes. And if you haven't seen this speech, I recommend you YouTube it later today. It's one of the most inspirational moments I ever spent at ESPN. That night I was there with my wife, Ann, and he gave an unbelievable speech that just left everybody, somewhat emotional, hair on the back of your neck standing up. But since that night that he announced that ESPN and he were starting the V Foundation for Cancer Research, we have raised $150 million, 130 of which has been donated directly to cancer researchers. And I am spending my time now working for the V Foundation. I'm in charge of a 7-year campaign that we're in the second year of. So anyway, that's one of the most emotional nights I spent at ESPN. And anyway, thank you for purchasing the book, because those proceeds, my proceeds, are being donated. So thank you for your support. I was very fortunate to spend 33 years at ESPN. I opened the book with what I call 2-minute interview. And a lot of young people here in this room today. I think this book, I think there's a lot of good things in this book for young people just starting out in their careers. My personal story was that when I graduated Denison University with an economics degree, I wrote a letter to every Major League Baseball team, including the Yankees. And my letter basically said, you need me in your front office. There was 28 teams at the time. I got back 27 we don't think so's. And interestingly enough, I don't know what would happen today if you wrote those letters. I would like to think you'd get a response, but I have the letters, all the rejections, and they were signed, or at least reportedly signed, by the general managers. They should have been authorized by Steiner Sports. I would know if they were authentic or not. But I got some really cool, letters back, even though they were saying no, from high-ranking guys. I'm pretty sure the one I got from the Yankees was from Stick Michael, Gene Michaels, and. But anyway, I got back 27 we don't think so. So I got one interview, 28 letters, one interview. And by the way, when I say I typed the letters, in 1980, you were typing letters with the correcto tape. Half you don't even know what that stuff is anymore. There were no word processors. My dad and I cranked out the letters. I got the one interview with the Phillies because the owner, Bill Giles, was a Denison alum where I went to school. I wouldn't even have needed my car to get to Philly. I was so excited. I would have run down I-95 for this interview. Turns out he didn't have a job. He gave me a Phillies tie. They had just won the World Series in 1980. So I left with a tie, no job, and I ended up bartending. I grew up just a few miles up the road in Greenwich. I was bartending at the time, and a friend of my dad's said, well, gee, if you're interested in sports, there's this 24-hour sports network in Connecticut. And again, you all know from living around here, and at the time, if you lived around here and you had an antenna, you got channel 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 13, maybe one or two others. You really didn't need cable television to get half a dozen channels. I had never even heard of ESPN. So I wrote a letter, threw my dad's friend's name in it. I got an interview, drove up to Bristol, about 60 miles. It's the opening chapter of the book. The interview lasted about 2 minutes. I'm there in my suit and tie, my college diploma, my resume. I'm all excited. I'm not sure the human resources director actually looked up at me during the interview. Calling it an interview was a bit of an overstatement. I was kind of invited into his office for 2 minutes. He's looking at my resume. He says, well, you'd be qualified to be a driver. I'm like, well, a driver? Have you seen my college education? He says, yeah, that's what I'm looking at. You'd be qualified to be a driver. You drive guys back and forth to the airport, and when it snows, you're the guy we ask to shovel the driveway. I'm like, oh my God. So the pay was $8,000 a year, which was about 1 year's tuition at Denison at the time. Sounds like the good old days now. But more importantly, it was probably about 25% of the jobs that I think I could have qualified for. The kinds of companies that were interviewing at a Denison in 1980 were, Denison is in Ohio, so we were getting some blue chip Midwestern companies, International Paper, Procter & Gamble, U.S. Steel. And you could get a salesman job, which is kind of the job I was looking for. You could get about $30,000 in a company car and a territory, and you'd be off to the races. But I wasn't interested in a sales job, selling paper or steel or soap. Just like yourselves, I was interested in the sports business. That's why I wrote letters to every Major League Baseball team. That's why I went up to ESPN, even though I hadn't heard about it. I came back to 60 miles, and I'm still close with my mom and dad. And my dad and I went out for a beer that night at a famous old restaurant in Greenwich called the Clam Box, which no longer exists. But if you grew up around this area, you might know about it. And we went out for a beer to talk about it because I was really uncertain whether to take a job as a driver in the mailroom for $8,000 a year. And he gave me, I think, the best advice I ever received. My dad said to me, if you think sports television is something you can be passionate about, can be interested in, and get your butt up out of bed every day and go to work and give it everything you've got, then I recommend you take that job in the mailroom. Get your foot in the door, because you're going to be making a career decision, not a money decision. Career over money. And fortunately, I took his advice. And about a week later, I was delivering the mail at ESPN and driving Dick Vitale back and forth to the airport. and shoveling snow. It's probably the best decision I ever made. I spent the next 33 years at ESPN. And fortunately, I was able to grow with a great company. By the way, back in the old days at ESPN, the primary prerequisite for getting promotion, having a pulse. I was like, can you do that? Yeah, I think I can do it. Well, good. Go over there and do it and let us know how you do. The company started to grow. And 4 months later, I was in the videotape library working from midnight to 8, pulling tapes of the 75 World Series to give Chris Berman so he can do a piece on baseball on the 2:30 a.m. show. A few months after that, a sales job, but for selling sports, something I was interested in, came open in Texas. We were all 24 years old, working around the clock, not even sure if the company was going to make it. But we were having fun. We were in a sports business. We were in a company we loved. So I went to apply for the job in Texas. I was reading trade magazines on the flight down to Texas. I didn't know anything about selling television to cable operators, but I'm reading magazines so I could sound somewhat intelligent in my interview. Guess what? I got the job. A month later, I'm driving around the southwest part of the United States selling ESPN to cable operators. By the way, I later learned I was the only person in the company that applied for the job. True. Greatly enhanced my chances of getting it. So that's how I got to the title of the book, Every Town is a Sports Town. You guys know this. You're in the business. You know what sports mean. But I'm driving around Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi, kind of the bedrock of our great country. I grew up only 20 miles north of here. I'd never been in those states. Talk about different culture, seeing different people, different cities. I had the most wonderful time meeting people. My speech was basically, hey, we're from Connecticut. God bless you. I should have left that Connecticut bit out. It didn't play that well down in Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi. But I said, we have a 24-hour sports network. We'd like you to put it on your cable system. And I heard the same response every town I was in. Whether I was in Waco, Biloxi, Tulsa, Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi. It was like, gee, George, 24-hour sports, that's really crazy. Why would anybody need 24 hours of anything? But we'll put it on because we got empty channels. If you're giving it away, which we were at the time, because you know, insert any town you want, this is a sports town. And I quickly learned what you all already know. Sports are such a fabric of this country. Every town in this great country of ours considers themselves a sports town. That's how I got the title of the book. And ESPN, town by town by town, and I was just handling the Southwest. We had people in similar positions across the whole country, started being added to every cable system in America. And I learned quickly how important sports are to the fabric of this country of ours. It may be high school, it may be college, it may be pro, it may be some combination. It varies wherever you are. But sports are an integral part of this country. Not only in the good times either. Not only on the Friday night lights. Not only on the Sunday afternoon baseball games. But think about the tough times we encounter as a country. Think 9/11. Think Hurricane Katrina. Think the attack at the Boston Marathon. And look at what sports plays in the healing process and the healing that our sports teams and our heroes and our fans and our broadcasters play in helping this country pull together in tough times. I mean, think about the times at Yankee Stadium after 9/11, or even the role after the Boston Marathon that Big Papi and the Red Sox played. I mean, it's really important. But anyway, that's really what this book is about. It's about the role that sports play in our country. ESPN tapped into that and has been riding that wave for 35 years, how important sports are in the United States. There's really three things that I think I want to touch on about ESPN that I think are applicable to Steiner Sports. Frankly, I think they're applicable to all companies And it's why I think this book works not only for young people in careers, but students just graduating, but also business people trying to build companies, build great companies like Steiner Sports. Its mission, brand, and culture are the three things that I think are key to ESPN's success. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the culture. I think the culture of ESPN is our strategic advantage. We've got tons of competition at ESPN. All the traditional broadcast networks, all the internet startups, the two guys in a garage right now trying to build an app, trying to figure out a better way to present sports news. We're very competitive. We're in a competitive business, just like you are, by the way, just like all businesses are. There are no easy businesses. There aren't any. And there's a lot of things as a business owner or as a manager of a business you can't control. You can't control your competitors. You can't control the economy. You can't control when the Rangers, unfortunately, don't win in Game 7, so you don't have a Stanley Cup final. There's a lot of things you can't control. But what you can control as a business leader or a team owner or a general manager is your culture. Your culture is absolutely within your control. And I think it's the most important thing a business leader can do is to set the culture of the company. What I talk about in this book is how the early culture at ESPN was established by guys like Bill Rasmussen, our founder, Chet Simmons, our second president, Scotty Connell, our chief of production and programming, both NBC veterans, Simmons and Connell, took unbelievable risks. You're leaving NBC Sports to come 100 miles north of Bristol, Connecticut, to start a cable sports network that goes 24 hours a day? What do you televise on Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon? Hello? But these people had a passion for the vision, and they set a culture that was based on family and based on having each other's back and thinking ahead. So you could lay in lessons for how Steiner Sports or ESPN or any company is going to operate 3, 6 months, a year from now. Thinking ahead is so important. They laid that into this culture. And I talk about that at ESPN. When I woke up 17 years later and was president of ESPN, I had a tremendous advantage. I grew up at the company. I knew I was surrounded by smart people. I wasn't going to pretend just because all of a sudden I was president that all of a sudden I knew a better way to produce a baseball game or a better way to program the network or, tell my CFO how to manage money or my chief strategy officer how to think about the strategy of the company. I think my mailroom background and growing up at the company was a benefit. I let my people continue to be experts in what they do because they were. And just because I was president wasn't president on Monday but became president on Tuesday, I wasn't going to start telling all these people how to do their jobs. I think that would have been a mistake. I looked at my role as supporting people and letting them do their jobs and focusing on the strategy of the company and the culture of the company. I wanted to double down on the people. People say, well, what's your leadership strategy? And I say, well, I like people. I like to get along with people. I empower people. My head of production is an expert in production. If he or she isn't, I should move that person in or out of that job. That's my job. But once they're in that job, my job is to support them and let them flourish and let them produce baseball games. They come up with the strike zone. They come up with better camera angles. They come up with, let's interview the manager during the game, which, by the way, only a few years ago was considered ridiculous. You can't talk to the manager during a baseball game. Now, of course, it adds to the fans' enjoyment. And just like Steiner Sports focuses on satisfying its customers, and you guys live to do that, whatever it takes, right? That's the mission of this company, take care of the customer. That's how ESPN views the sports fan. Anyway, culture to me is what I focused on at ESPN. I think it's the strength of the company, and as long as ESPN maintains that culture, I believe they'll be successful for the next 35 years as they have for the first 35 years. The second is brand. And you have a strong brand here at Steiner Sports. Very strong brand. ESPN has a strong brand as well. And you've got to protect that brand and nurture that brand. What does that mean? It means every day when you're on the phone with customers or you're out and about and you're representing Steiner Sports, you've got to do that with integrity. You've got to make sure you know what this brand stands for, doing new and innovative things like Moments That Matter. Moments That Matter is one of the greatest things I've ever heard in our business. And when I first became aware of it, I was down here a couple months ago, as I said, with the V Foundation. And by the way, thank you, Brandon, for the work and the work that you're doing to support the V Foundation. It's very appreciated by us who are working to defeat cancer. But there's a perfect example of nurturing your brand, right? That's a better product for sports fans who want memorabilia. I would urge you to continue to look for ways to enhance and nurture the Steiner Sports brand. It's very important. And by the way, it's even more important now that we've all got smartphones and computers, because your Steiner Sports competitor is only a click away. They don't like what they hear from you, or you don't treat them right, boom. One click of their thumb, they're on your competitor. So building the Steiner Sports brand in a digital world is even more important than it was a few years ago. People will do business with companies they like, with businesses with employees that have integrity, businesses with people who do what they say they're going to do. Like, hey, George, I'm going to invite you to talk to our employees. I'm going to have you down and actually do it like we're doing today. I'm telling you, if you just do, if in life you just do what you say you're going to do, that puts you ahead of a lot of people. Think about the people that tell you they're going to do stuff and they never do. I don't know what that percentage is, but they're out there. Be in the group that says, particularly in business, that if I'm going to do X, do it. Or if you can't do it, call your customer and say, I know I told you X. I cannot deliver on that. I'm sorry. Here are the reasons, but I'll do this for you. Just be a stand-up person. That builds the brand of Steiner Sports. That's how the ESPN brand was built. Yes, we got a lot of advantages. We're in the television business. We come up with ideas like the This Is Sports Center commercials that runs for, almost 20 years now, and they're funny, and we use all kinds of athletes, and they're great. And that builds the ESPN brand. And people can tune on to ESPN any day and see Mike and Mike, for example, this morning, builds the brand. Or they can tune on the French Open. That builds the brand. But what builds the brand, too, is our 7,000 employees who know that they've got to operate with integrity and treat our customers right. And the same lessons apply for you here representing Steiner Sports. And lastly is mission. ESPN's mission is to serve sports fans. And we're constantly trying to find new ways to do that. And if you look back, ESPN's had a pretty good run for 35 years. But none of it's been easy. And it was anything but an overnight success. But a lot of our success I attribute to following the mission to serve sports fans. I'll give you a perfect example. It's 2003, and high-definition television is just being invented. I know it seems odd to even think about now, and no one wants to possibly watch a sporting event or really anything else on TV that isn't high-def now in 2015, but it was anything but that in 2003. In fact, we'd already broken ground on a new digital center that we were spending over $100 million on that was all standard def. And my head of technology, Chuck Pagano, I write about this in the book, came to me and said, we got a problem. I'm like, yeah, what's the problem? He says, we're on the wrong track. Our digital center is going to be the wrong technology. And by the way, we got to launch high def. And I said, well, let's pull our senior management team together and you can explain the problem to all of us at the same time. So we get a bunch of people together and he puts in a high def set. Again, I know that seems like nothing today, but in 2003 it was like, well, what is that? Do we turn it on the same way? It was crazy. And he says, he basically put it to us, which is the kind of part of the ESPN culture that I like. Our employees feel empowered to give their opinions. And it's okay to tell the president, here's the way it's got to be. And he showed us the picture. He says, look at that picture. Would anybody disagree the picture's not better? And of course the answer was no, it was a lot better. And he basically said, if we believe our mission, if we believe our own stuff, and I'm not sure he used stuff there, but I'm cleaning it up a little bit for purposes of this audience this morning, then we have to launch that. And we got to do it and beat our competitors. It's better. If we believe what we say about serving sports fans, how can we not do it? There was no business model, and there was no agreement on the technology. It felt like an old Betamax VHS debate where the industry was lining up, and you were scared stiff you were going to bet on the wrong technology. That's not a good day for a TV network manager when you bet on the wrong technology. That is not a good day. He said, I will choose the technology. I will get it right. You guys figure out what you have to do with your parent company, Disney, to get the funding, etc. But we must do it. And we did. And we got a 4 or 5 year head start on our competitors who had their hands in the air saying, oh my God, I don't know what the right technology is. I don't know how we're going to make money on the $50 or $60 million investment or whatever it was. But that was an example of ESPN following its mission to serve fans. And it's a little messy, and you don't have all the answers, but as an innovative, growing company, you've got to follow your mission. And that's why I think this book is a good example for business leaders, because following your mission, and there's numerous examples. I just gave you high def, whether it's that or going into the internet, which seemed like, was brand new territory. We didn't know anything. The only thing we knew is that all of a sudden you could get a sports score on a computer. I know it sounds crazy in '05, but it wasn't in 1995. It was like, what? I mean, and what do you, what is that going to do to Sports Center? And do we, if we get a score, do we put it on ESPN.com before Sports Center? Yes. Serve fans. Or phone. Launched the phone in 2005. What? And how does that work? And would someone watch a game on there? Well, yeah, if they're stuck at a music recital or something, or they want to score, or they want to know how the Yanks are doing, yeah. And is it going to work? Yeah. Is it clunky? Yes. Was a game on there pretty bad the first? Yes. But now we have something called tablets, iPads. Can you watch it in your car if you're a sports fan and you have to? You better believe it. If you're home and you've got your big screen, are you going to use your phone or your tablet? No. But you're not home all the time. So following your mission leads you in the right direction. And you can't be scared about change and innovation. So I would say those three things, mission, brand, and culture, are really the keys to ESPN's success that I think are applicable to any business, certainly Steiner Sports. And following your culture and building your culture here is not here, but everywhere is an important aspect of your company's long-term success. So I wrote this book, and I could go on for a longer time, but I'd like to just stop there and see if there are any questions. I usually find that what's on your mind is interesting to me. And so any questions? Yes, sir.
My name is
Johan.
I had a quick question. Why do you think, or maybe you have an idea, all these other companies like NBC, they bought out Versus, and now Fox Sports has their own Fox Sports 1 channel. And you read online that they're trying to, I guess, mimic what ESPN already has. Why do you think that those companies are not having success now? Like say, like when ESPN first started, do you think it's something they're missing, or maybe they just have to go a completely different route when it comes to sports? Just wanted to get your take.
So, Johan, the question is, why are the ESPN competitors really not overly successful at this point? Well, I think a couple of things. One, and I think you enjoy that here at Steiner Sports. First mover advantage in business is extremely important. If you can establish a business and get a lead and build in customers, that's there's a lot of examples in business where the wannabes struggle. Look at the tablet business. We just talked about tablets, and look at the struggle that the competitors to Apple have in building that. Is a good example. So I think ESPN got like a 25-year head start, probably almost a 30-year head start before all of the broadcasters really put their weight behind a complement or a competitor to ESPN. So I think first mover advantage, and then I just like to think that the ESPN company is in good shape on its mission, its brand, and its culture. and is continuing to drive it what it does. I mean, ESPN takes hits and losses. We got lost the World Cup. We put everything we had into South Africa and Brazil. We got outbid by Fox by $100 million, and we can't throw around $100 million every time we turn around. So, you know, we had to give that up. We just invested a tremendous amount in the NBA, so we have to forgo NASCAR for a few years. So, I mean, it's not like ESPN doesn't sustain losses. So ESPN has to continue to evolve. But that's why I go back to mission, brand, and culture. The employees are going to demand that the company continues to innovate. Just launched a new network around SEC football last year, and remain strong. But I think it's those things that make it strong. Brandon.
A lot of young people in the room, salespeople for the Yankees, salespeople for Steiner. I got to roll back to the first few years, you know, after you got through the shovel and the snow part of it. What are some of the keys? I mean, I think everybody here would like to know, you know, well, would like to have the ultimate success and get to the top, but you know, what happened more at the earlier stages? What was the turning point for you that got you off the road selling, and what's some of the things you'd recommend to a 25 to 30-year-old that's, you know, grinding, selling? What's your recommendation of that?
That's a great question. The question is, you know, what is the recommendation to younger people on how to get ahead? I got a couple of thoughts. One is, I like the notion of being a student of the business. Someone gave me that concept early on. Think about it though. If you set a goal of learning something about your business I like every day, but that's super aggressive. Even if you said every week, but think about it. What did you learn last week? I'm not asking for specific answers, but I'm making a point. Think about, your business is changing rapidly. All businesses do. Everything evolves. So be a student of the business. I don't know if that means paying more attention to your trade magazines or you know, listening closer here at meetings. I mean, everybody loses their concentration occasionally and lapses, but I mean, are you actually trying to absorb what you're hearing at meetings here? And thinking about what you bring to the table about making Steiner sports business better later today, tomorrow, next quarter, 6 months? It takes work. Yeah, you can mail it in. You come to work and, you know, start thinking about when you're going to cut out, whatever time you cut out here. That ain't going to get you ahead. So I would think about constant learning, but it's work. I used to think about it reading the newspaper. Now, in the TV business, which isn't even really the TV business anymore, it's broadband and kind of mobile phones. It's in the newspaper every day now. It's turned out to be such a big business. And I used to discipline myself to read the articles and think about what I was reading, not just as a way to kill 12 minutes while I had a cup of coffee and say I read the paper. Think about it. And by the way, there's a lot of things in there I'd never understood, and I'd pick up the phone and ask somebody, what does this actually mean? Or what are the implications? So be a student of the business. Number one. Number two, I would look for mentors. I wouldn't think about having to fashion my whole career by myself. I wouldn't think about having to be like a solo warrior. It's really hard. I've found that if you ask people for help, they will give it to you. So think about acquiring mentors along the way. And then lastly, I learned this lesson, it's in the book. I was pumping gas in high school. There was 12 of us, 3 managers and 9 regular workers. And I think the managers got paid an extra quarter an hour. But the important aspect of being a manager was when it rained, you could pretend you were doing some paperwork in the office and the other guys would have to actually pump the gas. That was the major benefit of being the manager. So I thought I was next in line. Job came open. I didn't get it. I go up to see the owner. I'm like, what's happening here? I thought I was next in line to be the manager. He says, oh, I didn't know you wanted to be a manager. Light went off in my head. And here's the point. Have enough confidence in yourself. By the way, you got to be a credible employee. But if you're a credible employee, have enough confidence in yourself to tell your manager what you want to do, what your next job is. Tell Brandon you want to run this company someday. I think he'd actually like to hear that. Have enough confidence in yourself to tell your bosses what you want to do next. They cannot read minds, just like the owner of my gas station could not read my mind, and it cost me a few months of being a manager. So learn, student of the business, find some mentors, have enough confidence to say what you want out of your career. Nobody can read your mind. Those are my 3 thoughts. Yes?
Hi, George. I'm Mike. One of the biggest takeoff points for me in ESPN was kind of the surge of the anchors, the Dan Patricks, Keith Olbermans, more recently the Stuart Scotts. Was it a conscious effort to kind of make those guys stars, or did it happen organically?
Yeah, we were not smart enough at all to have these big thought-out marketing strategy. It somewhat happened organically, but I also not giving us enough credit a little bit. I mean, we let our people do their thing. And part of that was because ESPN was a new animal. It wasn't 3 minutes after the weather. It was like, you're on for an hour. And there's anecdotes in the book where we didn't even have access to highlights on a regular basis in the early days. I mean, we're driving tapes from Philly, New York, Boston, and Hartford. And we had plenty of coverage of teams from New York, Philly, but the rest of the country. So our talent would get, in their earpiece, hey, we're running short here, vamp on the AL East for 5 minutes. And so the guys who could do that are the guys that prospered at ESPN. Those who couldn't, couldn't make it. But I think out of that, all of their personalities came out. It's exactly what happened. Berman and his nicknames. Dan Patrick and Olbermann with the Big Show. Stu with his, kind of more urban approach to it. Their personalities shone through. I think it was because of function of kind of being on the air 24 hours a day, to answer your question. Yes?
You're talking about doing the HD, having that be a step ahead. I was fortunate enough to see one of my buddies had one of the 3D televisions.
Yeah.
And I was curious to see if you guys had a timetable on whether you're going to say pass, fail, if that's something that you're still pursuing, and what lessons you've learned from that process.
Well, the question is 3D, which is something I was personally pushing. I got a call. The biggest trade show in the United States is the Consumer Electronics Show. I don't know, I think they get 200,000 people in Las Vegas, and they're all standing in line for a taxi at the same time. Is the primary hallmark of that show. But I get a call like 3 weeks before that show saying, George, we're thinking about launching a 3D network, and Sony wants to make a $25 million announcement, with you and the CEO of Sony at the CES. Would you come out for that? And I'll walk to Las Vegas for $25 million. So that was kind of how we got started. But it was before its time, kind of clunky. No one likes the glasses. Didn't work. I mean, I left ESPN a year ago, so I am not completely up to speed on every single thing that's going on. But I know that they shut it down. But I was proud of it. We made it. It's another thing. We made a go of it. If it had taken off, and it still might. It's just the timing wasn't right. We would have been a decade ahead of our competitors if it had taken off. But I also think that if you're not making mistakes, or you're not trying things, I'd rather not think of it as a mistake. If you're not trying things as a business, then you're not trying hard enough. So what? Another little aspect of that 3D was my boss was Bob Iger, the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. And that 3D announcement, like the next day after we agreed to do everything with Sony, that made headlines in papers around the world, not just the United States. We were shocked at the coverage that received, ESPN to launch a 3D network. So I get a call from my boss, Bob Iger. Says, gee, I see in the newspaper we're launching a 3D network, which of course is corporate speak for, you didn't tell me about this. And he said, would you send me a business plan? I said, Bob, I assure you, as soon as we have a business plan for this, you'll be the first one to get it, which is a true story. But the point I'm making it is not everything can have a buttoned-up business plan, and ESPN doesn't operate that way. If there's something we think is going to serve fans, in this case we have Sony wanting me to willing partner with $25 million, we're moving. And if it doesn't work, next. As long as, I always said at ESPN, I learned this from Tom Murphy, who ran Cap Cities ABC. It's okay to make a mistake, as long as it's an honest mistake. I love that thought. And if you're not trying things, you can call them mistakes if you want. But if you're not trying things, you're not trying hard enough in business. Playing it safe is a road to the middle. Yes.
What do you think that ESPN must do to stay at the forefront with digital media now?
Well, I'll give you my favorite answer. I don't know. But what I do know is ESPN has 7,000 employees who know the mission of the company is to serve fans. And they know the culture is to basically demand innovation, always try new things, be innovative, take risks, etc. So I am not a technology expert, as my son James, who's with me today, will attest. But I've got 7,000 people that basically will demand that whatever it is, the company is going to move there. And that's kind of the attitude that I tried to build at ESPN, and that's in the culture. So, you know, I don't know what the next thing's going to be, but I guarantee you ESPN will be right there. Yes?
I think I know the answer, but I gotta ask. Why did ESPN drop the NHL?
Well, we tried hard to get back into it. We got outbid by NBC. And in fairness to us, and I'm close with Gary Bettman and had a respect for Gary, I would also say that he wished to stay with an existing partner, which I completely value. So between the money and loyalty, they stayed with NBC. But hopefully we'll get back in at some point. By the way, ESPN can't own everything. No, I didn't mean that as a joke. I mean, we can't. And it's just the prices for everything have risen so greatly over the last few years. I mean, our first contract with NFL in 1987 was for $153 million. And we were like, what? You're kidding. How are we going to, that's per season? No, that was actually a 3-year deal. How are we going to do that? Now our contract for Monday Night Football starts with a B, not an M. So the prices have risen so much that ESPN's going to have to pick and choose what it invests in. But we were trying to invest in hockey, in all fairness. Yes?
Is there a time that you can think of, whether it be a failure or something that, a mistake that happened, whether you were an intern when you first became president of ESPN, that you can remember that basically shaped you later on in your career, or something you go back to like, oh, I remember I did this, and I don't want it to happen again?
Johan, correct? That's a good question, Johan. I would say when we launched the phone, we did it with much fanfare. We got a spot in the Super Bowl, $2 million. We invested in it. We hired 40 or 50 people, and we're on the wrong business model. And I talk about this in the book. The first time I met Steve Jobs, who knows something about phones, I introduced myself to him at a Disney board meeting. Hi, I'm George Bodenheimer with ESPN. I hate your phone. That was his first words. And then he walked away. I'm like, this isn't going well for me. And but he was right. I mean, when he said I hate your phone, he meant we're on the wrong business model. Our instincts were right. I mean, how many times do you now access your phone for sports news, right? We all do. We're living with these devices now. It's changed the world. So our instincts were right, but our business model was wrong. And I think that influenced me, to answer your question, that a business leader can't get his ego in the way of saying, you know what, we made a mistake here. We got to shift our strategy. I think a lot of business leaders that get their egos mixed in with, and they stick with strategies they know aren't working for too long because they don't want to admit that they were on the wrong strategy. So I talk about that in the book. If you make a mistake, it's okay, as long as it's not a mistake. Shift your strategy. By the way, do it faster. Don't wait 13 months. Do it in 5 months, which is what we did. And by the way, since that time, ESPN retained all of these excellent people we hired, and ESPN has by far the leading market share in mobile sports today. So we took what was considered a failure and turned it into a pretty big success. A success that's very important in serving fans today, because all of you are using your phone to access at the Yankees. How the Yankees did. I know you guys won yesterday. Congratulations. Yes.
When ESPN went to Los Angeles, and now you have like a Los Angeles office, can you talk about making that decision to expand and having a base out there as well as in New York and Connecticut?
Yeah, we thought it was important to kind of plant a flag out west. I mean, we've been tagged with the Eastern bias thing for 35 years, which I never fully bought into, but I understand is out there. So we thought it would just make sense for us to have a West Coast office and just change the sensibility. The guys follow the West Coast teams out there, and so we thought that was helpful. And secondly, it serves as a disaster recovery center for us, because the business has gotten so big. If we had all of our eggs in the Bristol basket, God forbid there's a natural disaster or something, we can be back on the air in a couple of seconds with what we built in LA. So it's really those two things. But I think it's been a big win for us. I love that show, the early show, which is the late show out there with Stan and Neil, and I think they've done a great job. When the Lakers are hot, or you got an LA team that's hot, we get a lot of guests in studio. Just like you get a lot of folks here today, a lot of athletes here, because of your proximity, location's important. Bristol's a little out of the way. Yes, sir?
Going from someone who was driving to give you to the airport to someone who was essentially signing his checks, what was your biggest challenge in building credibility as you climbed the ranks? Because, I mean, like the book came out years ago, like there were a lot of stories about egos and ESPN and things that were going on inside. What was the biggest challenge for you to be respected by the people that you used to work for when they were working for you?
The question is, how do you maintain respect when you were the mailroom guy and then you're the president? It really wasn't a challenge for me, and I think it was because of the mailroom. I'm the same person that was in the mailroom, just happens to be in the president's office. I didn't try to be an expert on everything. I was the same person. I didn't have any reserved parking spot. I waited in line for my food. I just was one of the gang. So for me, it wasn't difficult.
Well,
Oh, Kelvin.
George, 33 years at the same company. I know you had mentors, you were a student of the business, and you weren't afraid to announce what you wanted your next job to be. But did you have a rough patch? Did you have a situation where you were thinking about leaving? You didn't get the promotion you wanted? Tell us about a difficult patch that you had and how you overcame it.
I never had a difficult patch where I didn't get, I had a pretty steady run. I had some tough times business-wise where things weren't going well, or it was actually when we were launching ESPN2, which again, ESPN has 9 networks now domestically. In 1993, when we said we want to launch a second one, people were like, it was like 79 all over again. It's like, well, what do you mean? Well, why do we need another one? And aren't we paying you enough already? And by then, in 1993, I was in charge of that effort. I was in charge of distribution. And we worked so hard that year. I had to have staff meetings on Sunday nights. I'll never forget that. And I remember saying to my staff, guys, we can't even meet during the week. Would you guys be okay having meetings on a Sunday night on the phone? And I'm a big work-life balance person. I like families, to me, is more important than business, and I think that's healthy. So I was really kind of worried about what was going to be the reaction of my team. And basically, and I talk about this in the book, the response I got was, what time would you like to have that meeting? My people were all in, and it was exciting trying to launch a second network, and we were working as hard as we ever worked. But I would say, to answer your question, that was probably the most difficult time, being away from the family and literally working round the clock for almost a year to get ESPN2 off the ground, which, by the way, launched on October 1st, 1993 with 10 million subscribers. It was the most successful launch of a new cable network ever at the time. It's succeeded now. And there was a huge party in our parking lot. And I was so exhausted, I looked in the party and went home. We were done. We were spent. We'd given everything we could to launch this thing, and but it was exciting.
You know, it's funny, George, how wobbly that process was, how wobbly the view of that, having that second ESPN2 thing. What are you possibly going to do with that network, and what are you going to put on? What more is there?
Well, maybe there's some.
That's how I feel with Steiner. That's how I kind of feel with Yankee premium tickets, which nobody thought would work. Nobody's going to buy tickets. Nobody would spend that kind of money. Wow. And I think that's probably the challenge, is like, just trying to see what's next without it being right in front of you. Because ESPN2, in my mind, I thought was going to fail. I really, what could you possibly put on there? Maybe you can go get a league to go on there. Was talk of
It was
that.
hockey, NHL.
Yeah, so it was so wobbly.
Yeah.
And yet, now I don't know what you do without it. I mean, now you got, ESPN News and Classic actually turned into another, and you need, almost feel like you need more.
Well, I think maybe there's two thoughts that might be applicable to Steiner Sports with ESPN2. Number one is, if you're not selling something that's different, it's very hard to sell anything, right? So as you think about your new products or what products you're gonna have tomorrow, how do they differ from what you're selling today? Because when we just went out with ESPN2, which was, we're gonna sell more, or it's like ESPN, that was like greeted with the biggest thud in the market. Like, why do we need another one? That's when we came up with the younger, hipper, cooler version of ESPN, skateboarding, rock and roll music, NHL hockey. That worked to sell it, didn't work as a programming concept, but it worked to sell it. So think about selling different as you think about your new products. And secondly, and this is also extremely valuable, and this is rife in the book, you will see it. Don't let anybody tell you your product isn't worth it. The minute you start discounting, caving, maybe I could do that, then you're on a road to the bottom. If you don't believe in the value of what you're selling, I guarantee you your customer isn't. So have confidence in what your pricing. I don't know your business, but I assume it's fairly subjective. You gather a piece, you decide what you think it's worth, and you're going out and trying to get it, I assume. Don't let anybody tell you your product isn't worth it. You've got to believe in the value of what you're selling. ESPN basically declared that it was the most valuable network in television at a conference like 20 years ago. It just came out. I didn't have a note. You know what the funny thing is in 20 years? Nobody ever once said, no, you're not. And the pricing for TV networks is subjective. I guess all pricing is pretty subjective. So believe in the value of what you're selling.
What's that dynamic been? I mean, have there ever been times where ESPN wanted to pursue something that Disney may not have necessarily been on board, or anything along those lines?
Well, it was the question is Disney and ESPN. We woke up one day in 1996. I mean, we're kind of a small-ish company in Bristol, Connecticut. We're not in a major media center. All of a sudden, we wake up, we're owned by the Walt Disney Company. It's like, oh my God, there's movie studios, theme parks, Mickey Mouse. I mean, it was unbelievable. And they wanted to do everything. They wanted to launch stores, restaurants. We had to run with the restaurants. Many other things. Very aggressive boss, Michael Eisner. You know, I mean that in a good way. I mean, he's a businessman extraordinaire. And I actually, and I write about this in the book, it kind of overwhelmed us. We didn't have a huge senior management team, and all of a sudden we had different groups of Disney coming in with this idea, that idea, this idea, meeting next week, this plan, take a look at this. And I called them and I said, you got to tell me how I'm supposed to operate here. I've got all these new friends from Disney, and you know, A, we're a bit overwhelmed, and B, we're not sure every idea we're hearing is a good idea. And I give him 100% respect for this. He said, George, you're in charge of the ESPN brand. If you don't think something, if you don't want to do something, then you tell them, no, we're not doing that. And I give him 100% credit for that. And so, I don't mean it to sound like it was overly, it wasn't negative, it was just a lot. And so he helped with that direction, manage through that. And I would say that Disney helped ESPN think about its brand much more so than we ever did before. We were a programming and production oriented company. The senior executives at ESPN were programmers or producers, not marketers. And they helped us think about, view the ESPN brand as a valuable asset and nurture it and grow it. And you can see all these years later, I've incorporated into my comments how the importance of brand. But they were right. And it's applicable for the Steiner Sports brand. Your brand is important, and you've got to continue to nurture it and build it. And so I give Disney credit, a lot of credit for that. Disney's been great for ESPN.
Being with like social media nowadays, you go on the internet, you can read a blog, and pretty much somebody who had a bad day could just say one bad thing about whether that be any company, ESPN, Steiner. How has ESPN tried to deal with negative perception, whether that be, you can read that, sometimes you'll read about maybe the personas on the channel are trying to, be bigger than the sport themselves. How has ESPN tried to overcome that? Like in the James Andrew Miller book that came out a couple years ago, I actually thought like that may or may not help because there was a lot of inside stories about, people that helped build the brand and, how you got Chris Berman, Stuart Scott. So just want to know how when you guys read something like that or heard something like that, what was, I guess, like the game plan, or was there a game plan to try to change that perception?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I read everything I could read. When I was president of that company for 13 years, I read every single thing that had ESPN in it. I mean, I read all day, and I didn't like everything I read. So to answer your question, I would read it all, and I would try to decide what I thought had merit and what didn't have merit, and what doesn't have merit I would ignore. But if I thought something had merit, I would try to address it. And oftentimes, you're going to have conversations with people. I put a high premium for how people act in the shop. That was my question all the time. When my producers would come to me and say, we're going to pay Jane or Joe a new contract, and we're going to pay him or her X, which was a growing amount of money over the years. And I always asked them the same question: how does she or he operate in the shop? Do they mentor young people? Do they walk around here like there's something special just because the camera's pointed at them? That stuff doesn't fly too well with me. I think, again, my mailroom background. So I put as much stock into how you operated in the hallways of our company as how you did when the red light was on and the camera was pointed at you. So that's how I try to deal with it, but it's not easy. That's how I try to deal with it. We got time for one
I
more?
just want to ask one quick thing also is.
We'll go to this gentleman, and then we'll come back, right? Brandon, we'll let you finish up.
How do you manage like the different personalities that you have to deal with, like on a network level? Like you have people like a Keith Olbermann or like a Scott Van Pelt or somebody who's got or like a Bill Simmons and who just left. Like how do you manage their personal objectives but align them with the company goals? Like is it kind of like a juggling act?
Yeah, it's definitely a juggling act. Again, partially what I just said here, I'm looking for people who want to support the ESPN company. I wasn't that big on people who only are out for their own agenda. And I like to promote team players and people who are trying to make other people better. I have a definition in the book for leadership, for leaders. It's pretty simple. Leaders are people who make other people better. If you do that, congratulations, you're a leader. There's a lot of ways to make other people better. You can mentor them, you can help them through tough times, you can teach them about the business. Those are the people I was looking for, and I would promote. And if you ask me more about the people that are in front of the camera, it goes back to my answer to Johan. Yeah, you got to be good in front of the camera, and that's important, and that's our business. But it's as important to me, how you treat our people when you're walking around the hallways.
I was just going to say, there's a couple key mentors. You talked about mentoring being an important aspect. Who were they, and any advice that they gave you that was pivotal?
Well, my number one mentor was my dad, who gave me the advice about the career decision and the money decision. But I learned that answer from my dad. My dad was not a high roller, he didn't finish high school, all he did was his job, and he treated you the same whether you were the president of the company or whether you were the receptionist. And I learned that from him, and I think that's valuable. And then Tom Murphy, who ran Cap Cities, was a major mentor to me. Basically, integrity is number one. No lawyer's going to screw up what we just agreed to with a handshake kind of guy. It's okay to make a mistake as long as it's an honest mistake. The kind of old school loyalty to partners, that kind of business acumen I got from him. I would cite those two.
It's a pleasure to have you this morning. You seem happy though. I mean, you're out of a pretty high intense job. When I look at you, when you're running ESPN, it can be an immense amount of pressure, a lot of work. Did it wear on you to the point where maybe you had to retire earlier than you wanted to, or is it
Well, I write about it in the book, and everybody, I got asked that question so many times, like, why would you possibly leave being #1 guy at ESPN? And I was just ready for a change, Brandon. You know, life is short, and I had 33 wonderful years, but I wanted to do some other things, so just was ready for a change is the answer.
And the V, would you say, in the top couple things?
Oh yeah, I'm spending a lot of time. I agreed to be the head of this campaign, which is $200 million over 7 years, and we're almost 2 years into it. So that's a lot of work, but I'm enjoying it. And, I'm meeting a lot of different people and learning about raising money. So it's been interesting.
Great, well, thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me.